My son's wife kicked me out of the house the day he died. After 5 years of being his full-time caregiver, she told me the show was over, and to be gone by nightfall. She stood before our family and painted herself as a grieving saint. She didn't know my son's last request was for me to find the hidden camera in his room and show everyone the truth. She thought she was starting a new life with his insurance money. I made sure she started it with nothing but her own lies. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. My name is Catherine Blackwood, and I am the mother of a beautiful boy named Samuel. This is the story of his final gift to me and how we finally told the world the truth together. The last 5 years of my life were measured in the rhythmic puff of an oxygen machine and the soft, worn pages of the books I read aloud to my son. My world had shrunk to the 4 walls of a sick room, a room in a beautiful Savannah house that had once been a place of joy, but had become a quiet, sunlit hospice. My son Samuel was dying. It was a slow, cruel departure. A degenerative lung disease that was methodically stealing the breath from his body. At 45, he was a ghost of the vibrant, laughing man he had once been, his body frail, his voice a soft whisper. And I, his mother, had become his hands, his feet, his constant companion. I had moved in with him and his wife, Victoria, the year after my own husband passed. It had seemed like the only logical, loving thing to do. I was a retired nurse, a widow with an empty house. My son was sick and he needed me. Victoria at the time had called me a godsend. Victoria Blackwood was a woman who was breathtakingly beautiful and terrifyingly ambitious. She was a master of public perception. To our friends, our church, our family, she was a saint. The devoted, grieving wife, putting her own life on hold to care for her dying husband. She would post long, poetic updates on social media about the sacred, heartbreaking journey they were on, and the comments would flood in, praising her strength, her grace, her selfless love. But inside the house, when the world wasn't watching, the saint disappeared. In her place was a cold, resentful woman who saw her husband's illness not as a tragedy, but as a tedious and financially draining inconvenience. The performance was for the public. The reality was for me and Samuel to endure. "Catherine," she'd say, her voice a sharp, impatient sigh as she walked into the room, a cloud of expensive perfume trailing behind her. The hospice supply company called again. "Did you order more of those disposable pads? Do you have any idea what those cost?" She spoke of the cost of everything. The oxygen tanks, the medication, the special food I had to prepare for him. She treated his illness like a failing business, and every expense was an affront to her bottom line. She never lifted a finger to help. I was the one who bathed him, who changed his linens, who held the cup to his lips, who sat with him through the long, sleepless nights when the pain was bad. I was the unpaid, live-in help, a servant in the tragedy she was starring in. Victoria's performance of the grieving wife was most brilliant when we had visitors. She would rush to Samuel's bedside, her face a mask of loving concern. She'd plump his pillows, her touch gentle for the audience, and speak to him in a soft, cooing voice. "How are you feeling, my love? Do you need anything?" Samuel, my sweet, tired boy, would just look at her, his eyes full of a deep, weary sadness that only I understood. He was too weak to fight, too exhausted to call out her lies. His silence was her greatest accomplice. The moment the visitors left, the mask would drop. She'd turn from his bedside without a backward glance and be on her phone in the hallway, her voice a cheerful, energetic thing as she made plans with her friends. "I know it's just so draining," I once overheard her say, her voice dripping with a false, martyred sigh. "But I have to be strong for him. Anyway, are we still on for brunch on Saturday? I have to get out of this house or I'll go insane." The house was her stage and we were her props. She was obsessed with the life insurance payout. I knew this because she was careless. She'd have loud, hushed conversations with the financial planner on the phone, conversations she thought we couldn't hear. She spoke of when this is all over, of the investments she would make, of the trips she would take. She was planning her widowhood while my son was still breathing in the next room. One afternoon I was sitting with Samuel, reading him a history of the city of Savannah. His breathing was shallow, labored. Victoria swept into the room not to check on him, but to grab a designer handbag from the closet. "I'm going out for a few hours," she announced, not looking at either of us. "Some of the girls are having a little get-together. Try not to let him, make a mess while I'm gone." After she left, A single tear rolled down Samuel's cheek. He turned his head on the pillow and looked at me, his eyes full of a pain that had nothing to do with his disease. "I'm sorry, Mama," he whispered, his voice a faint, raspy sound. "I'm so sorry." "Oh, baby, no," I said, my own heart breaking. "It's not your fault. None of this is your fault." "I see it," he whispered. "I see everything. I'm just too tired to fight her anymore." He knew. He saw it all. He was trapped in his own dying body, a silent witness to his wife's monstrous hypocrisy. And I was trapped with him, a mother who could do nothing but offer comfort, a quiet, constant presence in the face of her cruelty. The long goodbye was a slow, agonizing journey. And as my son faded, I could feel his wife's impatience growing. She was like an actress in a play that had gone on for too many seasons, waiting for the final curtain to fall so she could take her bow, collect her prize and move on to the next show. She had no idea that my son, my quiet, gentle boy, was writing a final secret scene of his own. A scene that would expose her for the fraud she was, and bring her entire carefully constructed stage crashing down around her. The end came on a Tuesday morning, just as the sun was beginning to stream through the Spanish moss of the old oak tree outside Samuel's window. It was quiet. It was peaceful. There was no great struggle, just a gentle, final letting go. I was there, of course. I had been there all night, sitting in the armchair by his bed, holding his thin, cool hand in mine. I felt the last faint flutter of his pulse. I heard the last soft sigh of his breath, and I knew he was gone. My heart, which had been bracing for this moment for 5 years, shattered into a million pieces. I laid my head on his chest, the silence of his body a deafening roar in my ears, and I wept. I wept for the boy I had raised, for the man he had become, for the life that had been stolen from him too soon. Victoria was not in the room. She had been on the phone in the hallway for the last hour, her voice a low, urgent murmur. I had been too focused on my son to pay much attention, but I had caught snippets of the conversation. Words like policy number, claim processing, and expedited payout. She was talking to the life insurance company. My son had not been gone for 5 minutes, and she was already securing her financial future. I was the one who called the hospice nurse. I was the one who called my daughter Naomi in Atlanta, my voice breaking as I told her that her big brother was gone. I was the one who sat with my son's body, stroking his hair, whispering my final goodbyes, until the men from the funeral home arrived. Victoria made a brief theatrical appearance as they were taking him. She rushed to his side, let out a single dramatic sob and clutched at the sheet that covered him. "My love," she'd wailed, her performance for the benefit of the 2 stoic funeral directors. They had seen it all before. They just nodded grimly and continued with their work. The moment they were gone, the moment the front door closed behind them, her grief vanished. She straightened her dress, wiped her perfectly dry eyes and turned to me. The look on her face was not one of sorrow. It was one of cold, hard, businesslike finality. "Well," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "That's that." I was still in a state of shock, my mind a numb, buzzing fog of grief. I couldn't comprehend her callousness. "The show is over, Catherine," she said, her voice sharp, impatient. "I've been playing the part of the devoted wife for 5 years. I'm done. My life has been on hold for long enough. It's time for me to start my new one." I just stared at her, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. "And that new life," she continued, her eyes sweeping around the living room, "a room filled with my own furniture, my own history, doesn't include you." What are you talking about?" I whispered. "I'm talking about this house," she said, her voice as cold as a surgeon's scalpel. "This is my house now. And I need my space. I need to grieve." She said the word grieve, with a sarcastic, mocking emphasis that made my blood run cold. "And I can't do that with you hovering around, a constant reminder of all this unpleasantness." She walked to the front hall closet and pulled out a small empty suitcase. She threw it on the floor in front of me. "I want you out," she said, her voice flat and absolute. "Today. By nightfall." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. I had just lost my son. My only son. My heart was a raw, open wound. And his wife, the woman he had been married to for 20 years, was kicking me out onto the street. "Victoria, please," I begged, the tears I thought I had no more of streaming down my face. "He's only been gone for a few hours. I have nowhere to go. This is my home too. I've lived here for 5 years. You have lived here as a guest, Catherine, she corrected me, her voice dripping with contempt. An unpaid nurse. Your services are no longer required. I need you to pack a bag with your essentials and I need you to be gone before I get back. I'm going out to meet with the funeral planner. And when I return, I expect this house to be mine and mine alone. She picked up her designer handbag from the hall table, checked her reflection in the mirror, and walked out the front door, closing it softly behind her, leaving me alone in the silent, empty house. I stood there for a long time, frozen, the empty suitcase at my feet. The cruelty was so profound, so absolute, it was almost beyond comprehension. She hadn't just been a neglectful wife. She was a monster. A sociopath in a Chanel suit. The shock eventually gave way to a desperate, panicked energy. She was serious. She would call the police if I was still here when she returned. Shattered by grief, my body trembling with a mixture of sorrow and a new, terrifying rage, I did as she said. I packed a small bag. My clothes, my medication, a few photographs of Samuel as a boy. I walked through the house one last time, a house where I had lovingly cared for my dying son, and I felt like a trespasser. I was homeless. I was heartbroken. And I was completely, utterly alone. I walked out the front door and into the bright Savannah sunshine, with no idea where I was going, my entire world reduced to the contents of a single small suitcase. I ended up on a park bench just a few blocks from the house. I sat there for hours, the world moving around me in a blur of normal, everyday life that felt like a cruel mockery of my own shattered reality. People walked their dogs, children laughed on the playground, and I just sat there, a 68-year-old homeless widow, my son's death and his wife's cruelty a fresh, gaping wound in my soul. My first call was to a friend, a woman from my church, who took me in without a moment's hesitation, her face a mask of horrified disbelief as I told her what had happened. My second call was to my daughter, Naomi. Naomi was a lawyer in Atlanta, a woman who had inherited my late husband's sharp, analytical mind and none of my soft, trusting nature. She had always been deeply suspicious of Victoria. That woman is a piranha in patent leather shoes, Mom, she'd always said. When I told her what had happened, the silence on the other end of the line was so cold, so absolute, I could feel the temperature drop. Stay there, she finally said, her voice a low, dangerous growl. Don't talk to anyone. Don't do anything. I'm driving down tonight. We're going to handle this. True to her word, she arrived late that night, her face a thunderous mask of protective fury. She held me as I cried, and then she began to strategize. But before we could even formulate a plan, the first move was made for us. A call came the next morning from a law firm in downtown Savannah. It was a man named Mr. Davies, and he said he was Samuel's estate lawyer. Mrs. Blackwood, he said, his voice kind but formal. I was so sorry to hear of your son's passing. He was a fine man. Thank you, I whispered. He instructed me to call you and only you the day after he passed, the lawyer continued. He met with me several weeks ago without his wife's knowledge. He made some specific arrangements. He has left a package for you in my care. He was very clear that it was to be delivered only into your hands. A package. A final message from my son. A new, fragile hope began to bloom in the barren landscape of my grief. Naomi and I went to the lawyer's office that afternoon. It was a quiet, dignified place, all dark wood and leather-bound books. Mr. Davies, a kind-faced man in his 60s, led us into his private office. He handed me a large, sealed manila envelope. Samuel was a very thoughtful, very deliberate young man, the lawyer said gently. He was very concerned about you, Mrs. Blackwood. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of. And he wanted to make sure that the truth was told. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside were 3 things. The first was a letter, several pages long in my son's familiar, slightly shaky handwriting. The second was a small, heavy, old-fashioned key. And the third was a tiny, innocuous-looking memory card, the kind that goes in a digital camera. Naomi and I sat in her car, parked under the shade of a large oak tree, and I read the letter aloud, my voice breaking with every word. Dearest Mama, it began. If you are reading this, then I am finally at peace. My only regret in leaving this world is that I am leaving you in it, and that I was not strong enough in these last years to protect you from the woman I married. I am not writing this to tell you things you don't already know. You are the most observant woman I have ever known. You have seen her cruelty, her neglect, her greed. You have endured it with a grace and a quiet strength that has been my only comfort. I was a coward, Mama. I was too sick, too tired, too broken to fight her. And for that I will be eternally sorry. But I could not leave this world without trying to make it right. I could not leave you to the mercy of a woman who has none. So I have made a plan. My final move in a game I was too weak to play while I was alive. The key is to a safe deposit box at the main branch of the First Savannah Bank. Inside you will find all the financial documents I could gather, proof of how she has been spending our money preparing for my death. More importantly, you will find my original handwritten will, which I have had legally witnessed and notarized, leaving my half of all our marital assets directly to you. The memory card is the most important thing. It is the truth. I have had a small hidden camera in my room for the last 6 months. A nanny cam they call it. I told Victoria it was an air purifier. It has recorded everything, Mama. Her words, her actions, her true self. It is a chronicle of her lies. And now I have one last selfish thing to ask of you. My last request. I know you are a woman of peace. I know you do not believe in revenge. But I am asking you to get justice for me. For us. Victoria is going to play the part of the grieving widow. She is going to stand before our family and tell them a story of her own sainthood. I am asking you when the time is right to show them the truth. Show them the footage. Let them see the woman I married. Let my final act on this earth be one of truth. I love you more than words can say. Be strong. And make her pay. Your loving son, Samuel. I finished the letter, the tears streaming down my face. It was a gift from beyond the grave. A final, desperate act of love from a son who had tried to protect his mother in the only way he had left. He had not been a coward. He had been a quiet, brilliant strategist. He had left me a roadmap. He had left me the weapons. And he had left me with a sacred final duty. The unseen truth was in our hands. And we were going to make sure the whole world saw it. The safe deposit box was a cold, sterile drawer in a cold, sterile vault. As I turned the key Samuel had left me, I felt a profound sense of purpose. I was no longer just a grieving mother. I was the executor of my son's final will and testament, not just the legal document, but his true final wish. Inside the box was a thick folder of documents just as he had promised. Naomi, with her lawyer's eye, immediately began to sift through them. There were credit card statements, filled with charges for designer clothes, spa days and expensive jewelry, all made while Samuel was in the final, most expensive stages of his illness. There were bank records showing large transfers of money from their joint savings account into a new, private account in Victoria's name only. And there was the will, a simple, ironclad document, legally witnessed, leaving his half of all marital property, including the house and his life insurance policy, directly to me. She's not just cruel, Mom, Naomi said, her voice a low, furious growl as she looked at the statements. She's a predator. She was looting the estate before he was even gone. But the most important item in the box was the one we had come for. The memory card. We went back to my friend's house, a quiet, safe place where we could face the truth without interruption. Naomi slid the small black chip into her laptop. A series of video files labeled by date appeared on the screen. Are you ready for this, Mom? She asked gently. I took a deep breath. I have to be, I said. For Samuel. She clicked on the first file. The image that appeared was of Samuel's room, filmed from a high, discreet angle from the top of a bookshelf. The air purifier was perfectly positioned, capturing the entire room. The hospital bed, the armchair where I had spent so many nights, the doorway. The first few clips were mundane, showing me administering his medication, reading to him the quiet, sad rhythm of our days. But then Victoria would enter the room and the atmosphere would change. We watched a clip from a month before Samuel's death. Victoria walked in, dressed for a night out, a cloud of perfume around her. I'm going out, she announced, not looking at him. Don't call me unless it's a real emergency. And I mean a real emergency, not just one of your little panic attacks. Samuel, his voice a weak whisper, said, Could you get me some water before you go? Victoria let out a loud, theatrical sigh. Oh, for God's sake, Samuel. The picture is right there. Can't you do anything for yourself? She turned and walked out, leaving him alone, his request ignored. We watched another clip. She was on the phone, her back to the camera, her voice a cheerful, energetic thing. "I know it's been forever since I've had a real vacation," she was saying. "But trust me, as soon as this is all over, I am booking a first-class ticket to Hawaii. I have earned it." The most damning footage was a series of clips showing her neglect. We saw Samuel in the middle of the night, having a coughing fit, his weak voice calling out for her. "Victoria, Victoria, please." The camera showed her bedroom door just down the hall remaining firmly shut. She had either not heard him or she had chosen to ignore him. Clip after clip, the camera revealed her true nature. We saw her mocking his weakness to a friend on the phone. We saw her complaining about the smell of the medication. We saw her, in one particularly chilling moment, standing over his bed while he slept, her expression not one of love or sadness, but of cold, hard impatience, as if she were willing him to die faster. It was a horrifying, heartbreaking chronicle of a private hell. I wept not just for my son's suffering but for my own ignorance. I had seen her coldness, but I had never understood the true depth of her cruelty. And then we came to the last file on the card. It was different. The date was from just 3 days before his death. The camera was no longer on the bookshelf. It was on his bedside table and it was pointed directly at him. He had moved it. This was a message. His face filled the screen. He was gaunt, his breathing shallow, but his eyes were clear and full of a fierce, desperate love. "Mama," he whispered, his voice a raw, painful sound. "If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone. And it means my plan worked. I'm so sorry for what you're about to go through. I'm sorry for the pain she's going to cause you." He took a ragged breath. "I want you to know that you were my angel. My only comfort. My only reason for holding on as long as I did. I love you more than life itself." Tears were streaming down his face and down mine. "But I can't rest, Mama," he continued, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "Not if she gets away with it. Not if she stands before our family and tells them her lies and they believe her. She has to be exposed. Not for revenge. For the truth. The truth of who she was. The truth of what she did. It's my last request, Mama. Please, please show them. Show them all. Let my last word on this earth be the truth." The video ended. Naomi and I sat in the silence, the weight of his final words settling over us. He had given us our mission. He had given us the weapon. And he had given us the reason. Not for revenge. For the truth. "Okay, Samuel," I whispered to the empty room. "Hey, baby. Mama will do it. I'll tell them the truth." The week leading up to the memorial was a masterclass in Victoria's particular brand of public grief. Her social media was a torrent of performative sorrow. She posted old, happy photos of her and Samuel, with long, rambling captions about her soulmate, her hero, her unbearable loss. She wrote about the 5 sacred years she had dedicated to his care, painting herself as a martyr who had selflessly sacrificed her own life for his. The comments poured in, hundreds of them, all praising her strength, her devotion, her saintly character. "You are an inspiration, Victoria. Samuel was so lucky to have you. A true angel on earth." Reading the comments was like swallowing acid. Every word of praise for her was a dagger in my heart, an insult to my son's true suffering. She planned the memorial gathering herself, a large, catered affair to be held at the house. She made it clear through a series of cold, formal text messages that I was not welcome at the house before the event. She was preparing, she said. Naomi and I knew what that meant. She was erasing me. She was scrubbing the house clean of the 5 years I had spent there, the 5 years I had been the one to actually care for my son. The day of the memorial, Naomi and I arrived to a house that was both familiar and chillingly alien. The comfortable, lived-in furniture that had been mine and my late husband's was gone. In its place was sleek, modern, impersonal furniture, the kind you see in a hotel lobby. My family photos had been taken down from the mantelpiece, replaced by a single large, professionally shot portrait of her and Samuel, a picture from years ago before his illness. The house no longer felt like a home. It felt like a stage, perfectly set for the final act of her performance. The house was filled with family and friends, a somber, black-clad crowd. They all came up to me, offering their condolences, their faces etched with a sympathy that was now, I knew, mixed with a quiet pity for the poor, old mother who had been so dependent on her gracious daughter-in-law. Victoria was magnificent. She moved through the crowd, a tragic, beautiful figure in a chic, black designer dress. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her voice a soft, trembling whisper. She clutched a handkerchief in her hand and would occasionally dab at her eyes, a perfect practiced gesture of a woman on the verge of collapse, but holding on through sheer heroic strength. She made sure to greet every guest, to share a tearful whispered memory of Samuel with each of them. She was playing the part of the grieving widow to perfection, and the audience was captivated. Finally, when the house was at its fullest, she stood before the fireplace in front of the large, smiling portrait, and tapped a glass for attention. A hush fell over the room. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice thick with a fake, theatrical emotion. "It means the world to me to see how much my Samuel was loved." She took a shaky breath, placing a hand over her heart. "The last 5 years," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "were the hardest of my life. But they were also the most sacred. To be able to care for the man I love, to be his hands and his feet, to be his comfort in the darkest of nights. It was a privilege. A heartbreaking, exhausting but profound privilege." I stood in the back of the room, Naomi's hand a firm, steady presence on my arm, and I felt a rage so cold and so pure it almost took my breath away. She was stealing my life. She was stealing my story. She was taking the 5 years of my own selfless, thankless devotion and she was wearing it like a costume. "People have called me strong," she continued, a single perfect tear rolling down her cheek. "But I wasn't strong. I was just a wife, doing what any wife would do for the love of her life. I would have done it for another 50 years if I could have. My only comfort now is knowing that he is at peace, and that I was there by his side every single step of the way." She raised her glass. "To my husband," she whispered, her voice cracking with a final award-worthy sob. "The love of my life. I will miss you forever." The room was filled with the sound of quiet weeping. My own family members, my nieces, my cousins, were looking at her with expressions of pure, unadulterated admiration. They had believed her. Every last, poisonous word. This was the moment. The moment Samuel had prepared me for. The moment of truth. Naomi squeezed my arm. "It's time, Mom," she whispered. My heart was pounding, a frantic drum against my ribs. But as I looked at Victoria standing there in her cloud of lies, basking in the undeserved sympathy of the crowd, a new, powerful calm settled over me. This wasn't for me. This was for him. I took a deep breath and began to walk towards the front of the room. The crowd parted for me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and pity. Victoria saw me coming, and for a single fleeting moment, a flicker of something other than grief crossed her face. Annoyance. I reached the front of the room and turned to face the silent, watching crowd. I turned to face my family. "Victoria's words were very beautiful," I began, my voice quiet but clear, carrying through the hushed room. "But my son Samuel had one last thing he wanted to share with you all. One last message he wanted you to see." And with that, I reached into my purse and pulled out the small black memory card. All eyes in the room were on the small black memory card in my hand. Victoria stared at it, her expression a mixture of confusion and a dawning, flickering panic. She had no idea what it was, but she knew instinctively that it was a threat to the perfect tragic narrative she had just so carefully constructed. "Mother Blackwood," she said, her voice a sharp, strained whisper, trying to maintain her composure. "This is hardly the time or the place. People are grieving." "I know they are," I said, my voice steady, my gaze unwavering. "And that is why they deserve to hear the truth. From Samuel himself." Naomi, my brilliant, prepared daughter, stepped forward. She had brought her laptop and a small, portable projector. With a calm, efficient silence, she set it up on a small table, connecting it to the large flat-screen television that was mounted over the fireplace, right below the smiling, oblivious portrait of Victoria and my son. The room was dead silent now, the air thick with a tense, uncertain anticipation. My family members, my friends, they all looked from me to Victoria, their faces a canvas of confusion. Naomi inserted the memory card into her laptop. A series of video files appeared on the television screen. She clicked on the final one, the one Samuel had recorded as his last message. And then his face filled the screen. A collective gasp went through the room. It was Samuel. But it was not the handsome, healthy man from the portrait. It was the Samuel of the last few weeks of his life. Gaunt, frail, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. But his eyes were clear and they were looking directly at the camera, at us, at his family. "Mama," he whispered, his voice a raw, painful sound that was a physical blow to everyone in the room. If you're seeing this, it means I'm gone. And it means my plan worked. Victoria let out a small, strangled sound. The color drained from her face. He knew. In that instant she knew she was ruined. Samuel continued, his voice weak but filled with a fierce, undeniable truth. I'm so sorry for what you're about to go through, he said, his eyes finding the camera as if he were looking directly at me. I'm sorry for the pain she's going to cause you. He took a ragged breath. I want you to know that you were my angel. My only comfort. My only reason for holding on as long as I did. I love you more than life itself. Tears were streaming down my face, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of a fierce, terrible pride. But I can't rest, Mama, he said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. Not if she gets away with it. Not if she stands before our family and tells them her lies and they believe her. She has to be exposed. And then Naomi, with a cold, precise fury, began to play the other clips. The room was forced to watch the unseen truth. They saw Victoria in her designer dress, telling my son not to bother her with his little panic attacks. They heard her tell him to get his own water as she walked out the door. They heard her on the phone laughing with her friends, planning her trip to Hawaii, talking about how she had earned it. They saw the footage from the middle of the night. They heard my son's weak, desperate calls for help. And they saw the door to his wife's bedroom remain firmly, damningly shut. With each clip, the atmosphere in the room grew colder, more horrified. The quiet weeping for Samuel was replaced by a low, angry murmur directed at Victoria. My family members, my cousins, my nieces, the same people who had been looking at her with such pity and admiration just minutes before, were now staring at her with expressions of pure, unadulterated disgust. She stood there, frozen, trapped in the glare of the television screen, her own private cruelty projected for the world to see. Her beautiful, tragic performance had been ripped away, revealing the ugly, rotten truth underneath. Naomi played Samuel's final message one last time. It's my last request, Mama, his voice whispered, filling the silent, horrified room. Please, please show them. Show them all. Let my last word on this earth be the truth. The screen went black. The silence that followed was absolute, profound. And then it was broken. It was Samuel's uncle, his father's brother, a large, quiet man who rarely spoke. He stood up, his face a mask of thunderous rage, and he looked at Victoria. You, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Get out. Get out of this house. And don't you ever dare speak my nephew's name again. One by one the family turned on her. The whispers became accusations. The looks of pity became looks of contempt. She was no longer the grieving widow. She was a monster, a ghoul who had feasted on our sympathy. She didn't say a word. Her face was a pale, blank mask of shock. She turned, and with what little dignity she had left, she walked through the silent, parted crowd of the family she had so desperately tried to impress, and she walked out the front door. The memorial was over. The performance had ended. And the truth, my son's truth, had finally been told. In the end, it was all that mattered. The house, the money, the life insurance. Naomi, with Samuel's will in hand, would handle all of that. Victoria would be left with nothing but her own lies and the public shame of her actions. But for me, the victory was not in her ruin. It was in the fulfillment of my son's last request. I had given him a voice when he had none. I had honored his memory. And now, finally, surrounded by the true, complicated but real love of my family, I could begin to grieve him in peace, his truth at long last shining in the light.